Good day, everyone. Welcome to the QEM Heroes webinar series. I'm Christine Wood, and I serve as the Assistant Program Director for the Heroes Fellows Program at QEM. For more than 30 years, QEM has been a national catalyst for STEM education transformation and research capacity building. Currently, the QEM network serves nearly 900 colleges and universities and reaches more than 8,000 individuals nationwide. This webinar is part of the HEROES initiative. The HEROES program brings together former federal scientists to lend their expertise and support to the STEM research and education communities. Our fellows are here to provide tools and tips for navigating the funding landscape, developing STEM programs and partnerships, and improving talent retention in in-demand fields. We hope this series promotes engagement with our HEROES Fellows and provides valuable resources to our participants. As a note, the webinar recordings and slides will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. By attending this webinar, you will soon be added to the QEM network and granted access to the Resource Hub, and you will get that invitation by email. I am so proud to introduce our HEROES Fellows today. Dr. Sharmini Pitter-Boghos holds a PhD in Environmental Earth System Science and Archaeology from Stanford University. Her experiences in STEM workforce development with minority-serving institutions include 8 years at Florida A&M University as the Assistant Director of the NOAA Center for Coastal and Marine Ecosystems and Interim Director of the Florida Georgia Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation, or ALSAMP. With expertise in science-informed program strategy, science diplomacy, federal grant management, and community engagement, Sharmini is committed to building inclusive ecosystems where science serves society through trust, transparency, and transformative partnerships. And Dr. Jennifer Riehl is an environmental scientist and policy professional with experience in multidisciplinary collaboration, federal grants management at NSF and USDA, and developing collaborative environmental science and land management policy strategies. She has expertise in forestry and community genetics, wildfire science, data science, environmental policy, and public outreach. So without further ado, I'd like to turn the floor over to our presenters today.
Thank you, Christine. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Before we get into the main presentation on the National Science Board report, we have a few housekeeping notes. If you need closed captioning, you can turn captions on under the More button by clicking the option Show Captions. And as Christine mentioned, the slides of this presentation and the recording will be available in the QEM Resource Hub. As a heads up, we will be going over a lot of dense information today, so if you have any questions while we're speaking, please feel free to type a question in the Q&A, and we will pause to take your question. We would also like to share a disclaimer that all views expressed in this presentation are the presenter's own personal views only. We do not represent NSF, the federal government, QEM, or anyone else. The views expressed do not constitute official advice or guidance and are based on our own experiences and research. Today, we will be exploring the National Science Board report published on December 17th, 2025. The report is titled Merit Review for a Changing Landscape. We hope you will also be able to join us for our next webinar in August, when we will continue our exploration of the National Science Foundation's Proposal and Award Policies and Procedures Guide, with a focus on the parts of the PAPG most relevant to proposal preparation. Before we dive into the details of the report, here are a few points about the National Science Board to keep in mind. The National Science Foundation Act of 1950, enacted by U.S. Congress, established both the foundation and the National Science Board. The board generally consists of 24 members with the NSF director for a total of 25, and the members are drawn from academia and industry and appointed by the president to serve 6-year terms. In addition to pursuing the goals of the NSF, the board identifies issues that are critical to NSF's future and approves new major NSF programs. In our last webinar, we covered the history of the NSF Merit Review criteria, and one of the consistent themes was a continual process of assessment and improvement of the criteria. The National Science Board plays an important role in that assessment process. The new assessment we will look at today is in line with that. We will cover some of the data consulted and analyzed for the report findings and recommendations, and a little about how changes to the NSF merit review process are generally incorporated into policy and implemented. In 2025, we celebrated 75 years of the NSF. The current merit review process has been in effect since 1997, and the last National Science Board review of the criteria occurred in 2011 and largely left the previous criteria intact. Over the past decade, 3 laws have expressed congressional intent and interest in reviewing the criteria. There have also been developments through the CHIPS and Science Act and other assessments done between 2011 and 2020. On February 16th of 2023, the NSB established a commission to re-examine the current NSF merit review policy, associated criteria, and process. The report of that commission was published in 2025 and is the topic of our webinar today. Overall, the National Science Board recognizes the importance of the National Science Foundation to the success of the United States in maintaining its standing as a global leader, and they sought to strengthen the national scientific enterprise by ensuring a robust merit review process that reflects the needs of the modern research community and broader society. Our original plan for this webinar was to review the updates from the May 5th National Science Board meeting and to notify you of upcoming NSB meetings. Unfortunately, as you may know, every member of the National Science Board was fired by the Trump administration on April 24th. So today we will focus on the past report and what the NSB suggested for improvements to the NSF proposal assessment process for continued improvement to the United States scientific enterprise. In 2023, the NSB also published a report envisioning the future of the U.S. scientific enterprise. As it states here, this report lays out what the National Science Board believe the U.S. must do in order to maintain its position as a world leader in innovation in the year 2030. In this vision, the NSB hoped that the U.S. would continue to make the investments needed to fuel an innovation economy and remain preeminent in science and engineering, attract world talent, set the standards of scientific values that are utilized throughout the world, create more STEM career opportunities that are available to all Americans, create an accessible and attractive science and engineering enterprise that reflects the demographics of the nation, encourage industry, academic, and government partnerships to bring national research and development priorities to fruition and accelerate the discovery to innovation cycle, and for NSF to continue to drive U.S. innovation through fundamental research and serve as a leader in the evolution of global science and engineering practices. These are still goals we can reflect on as we look at the results of the NSB report throughout the webinar. The recommendations we'll cover today from the most recent report are currently suggested changes and will need to be incorporated into an updated version of the PAPG in order to take effect. Policy updates require NSB consultation with NSF to ensure consistency with agency procedures, plus consideration of public comments. Once this is complete, the revised policy will be incorporated into the new version of the PAPG as determined by NSF leadership. The current PAPG version 24-1 and the associated supplements remains the current guidance for proposal submission. Jennifer and I will be providing updates to the PAPG as part of our ongoing webinar series. There is also a recording of our April seminar available in the QEM Resource Hub for anyone interested in a summary of the latest PAPG supplements or addendums. You can also sign up for NSF alerts to be notified when the next version of the PAPG becomes available. And we've included the link to sign up on this slide. Now we're going to go over some of the sources of information that the National Science Board Commission reviewed and some of the strategies they used to analyze the merit review criteria. To prepare the report, the NSB Commission conducted listening sessions to gather feedback from science and engineering research community stakeholders about the external impressions of the NSF merit review process. Attendees offered comments on institutional support and tracking of broader impacts related award outcomes. Information gathered in these sessions was not used as evidence towards making recommendations, but they did help frame the Commission's understanding of the stakeholder landscape. In March 2023, Commission members held a listening session at the 2023 Advancing Research Impacts in Society Summit in Baltimore, Maryland. Over 120 broader impacts experts were present during the 90-minute listening session. This conversation focused on specific suggestions related to the broader impacts criterion and helped inform the Commission's discussions. In June of 2023, the Commission Chair and Vice Chair met with members of the Committee on Equal Opportunities in Science and Engineering, or CEOS, in a public discussion on merit review. This same group also met for public discussions 1 year later in June of 2024. CEOS was established by Congress in 1980. Members are appointed by the NSF director and serve 3-year terms with potential renewal for an additional 3 years in keeping with the 6-year terms held by the NSF directors. These listening group sessions focused on recent CEOS reports, the status of recommendations that were made to NSF regarding specific areas of interest, and engaging on specific suggestions related to the work of this NSB Commission. On August 14th of 2023, the NSB Commission held a STEM federal funding agency panel. This was a public panel with representatives from NIH, the Department of Energy, NASA, ARPA-H, and DARPA. The discussion focused on approaches to research grant review within the federal government. In January of 2024, Commission members held a focus group with 28 provosts, vice presidents of research, graduate school deans, sponsored research officers, and public engagement officials from institutions within the Big Ten Academic Alliance. This conversation focused on how these institutions support principal investigators in their efforts related to broader impacts and intellectual merit, and how those criteria are used in evaluating faculty for tenure and promotion. In August and September of 2024, the Commission contracted Mathematica to organize 2 focus groups to understand perspectives held by them on the current review process. The first was comprised of individuals currently serving as vice presidents of research or a similar role at an academic institution. The second group was comprised of individuals who served on an NSF advisory committee and committee of visitors panel. Overall, the listening sessions and focus groups helped the NSB Commission understand what viewpoints are held throughout the scientific community regarding the NSF proposal assessment process, particularly within academia and federal agencies. In addition to the scientific community listening sessions and focus groups, the National Science Board Commission also conducted a review of past Committee of Visitors reports. As stated in the COV policy records, the COV is comprised of external experts appointed as special government employees to conduct a review of the quality and integrity of the NSF merit review process. NSF relies on the Committee of Visitors to provide an external review of the merit review process and to take a close look at the technical and managerial matters pertaining to proposal determinations. The National Science Board Commission conducted a longitudinal review of past COV reports, a total of 28 reports, dating from 2012 to 2023. The 28 reports represent 25% of the Committee of Visitors reports completed since the previous Merit Review Task Force conducted a similar review in 2011. Reports covered reviews from two divisions within the Engineering, Geosciences, and Math and Physical Sciences directorates. Reports covered reviews from one division within the Directorate of Biological Sciences, Computer and Information Science and Engineering, STEM Education, Social, Behavioral, and Economic Science, and the Director's Office of Integrative Activities, or OIA. Comments were then categorized as positive if commending the directorate or division, critical if offering a critique, neither if neutral, or recommendation if offering specific advice or avenues to resolve discussed challenges. The Commission concluded that the broader impacts criteria were viewed more critically than the intellectual merit criteria based on the combined number of critical comments and recommendations. Feedback from the research community through Committee of Visitors meetings also revealed a concern for the discrepancy in how broader impacts and intellectual merit have been assessed through the review process. And we've talked a little bit about this in previous webinars in this series. So, in reviewing the COV reports, a total of 543 comments were collected from the reports from 2012 through 2023. From that, 150 or 27.6% were categorized as positive, 203 or 37.4% were categorized as critical, and 172 or 31.7% were categorized as recommendations. Overall, Committee of Visitors reports were grouped from 2012 to 2016 and 2017 through 2023. The proportion of critical comments were seen to have increased over time within the 2017 to 2023 cluster. Although the absolute number of positive comments remained similar over time, 76 in the first cluster and 74 in the second, the number of critical comments increased from 77 in the first cluster to 126 in the time from 2017 to 2023. The group speculated that this change may reflect the changes in the prompts provided for the COV report since 2011. The Commission also noted that there were discrepancies in perception of the merit review process across directorates. They concluded that further study is required to understand these differences, including study of disciplinary understanding of the criteria, reviewer training methods, and best practices in merit review implementation. I will now turn it back over to Jennifer to go over the overall NSB report findings.
Jennifer, you're muted.
My bad. Apologies, everyone. Thanks, Sharmini. Now that we've seen the diverse data inputs that went into this report, we're going to get into the findings of the report. And I've broken them into a few categories, including what's working well currently, what they identified as areas of improvement, and then recommendations for making those improvements. So the report identifies three key findings about what's working well with the current merit review process. They found that a competitive merit review process with expert review continues to be the best method to fund science and engineering research and education, and it still serves as an example for other organizations within the US, but also other nations. They also found that using the two criteria, intellectual merit and broader impacts, are still appropriate criteria to assess and fund proposals, and that will advance NSF's mission. So to illustrate the tangible benefits of this merit review system, they also shared some funding success stories that have been transformative, even if they took decades to manifest. And some of those examples include the creation of the internet, 3D printing, development of the MRI, and creation of the first dictionary for American Sign Language. And if you're interested in reading more about those impact stories, there's a link on this slide that takes you to the report, and it's on page 12. So lastly, they also found that program officers play a vital role in connecting the agency to the science and engineering community, and that the merit review process is strengthened when program officers are empowered in decision-making and portfolio construction. So we have a slide at the end of the presentation that lists the 6 policy recommendations that the National Science Board made in this report. And we've also linked that slide to these slides specifying the policy recommendation numbers that are relevant to the specific findings. So these findings in particular align with one of the policy recommendations, the second one made by the report, that stated that they should keep the 2 criteria as part of the merit review process. So in terms of what they looked at that could be improved, overall, the report's goal was to provide recommendations that will continue to improve transparency, clarity, and accountability of the agency. One of the findings noted that a more transparent and separated evaluation of the 2 merit review criteria could improve a holistic assessment of proposals. And as Sharmini noted, there's more confusion about how to apply and assess the broader impacts criterion. And a change in the way that those 2 criterion are assessed could help close that gap. Additionally, they suggested that an expansion of the expert reviewer pool in terms of sectors, communities, geographies, and institution types would help better reflect the full range of perspectives on intellectual and societal benefits of science and engineering, research, and education. So these findings in particular align with several of the report's recommendations, include policy recommendations, including refining criteria definitions, emphasizing the importance of both criteria, ensuring diverse participation in the process, and updating merit review policies and procedures to increase transparency and accountability. So the report also noted some improvements that could be made to the internal workings of the NSF that could reduce administrative burden as well. A lot of portfolio-specific assessments happen at the local level of the directorate or the division, and it's not always consistent, aside from the high-level stats that the National Center for Science and Engineering Statistics does. So part of what they are suggesting is in hopes of improving the usefulness of the data that is being collected. And one of the things that they suggested was that award portfolios may better inform agency strategy and improve accountability if they're constructed and managed above the level of individual programs. That would also include establishing and tracking consistent metrics for longitudinal award tracking. And that would also include an assessment of what gaps or needs exist within the current data infrastructure. So that's important because the way that NSB communicates the value of NSF investments is through some of these more longitudinal stories that they find through grant tracking. And I don't think it got mentioned earlier, but when we were talking about what the point of the National Science Board is, one of the things that they do spend a lot of time on is communicating to the relevant committees in Congress on the importance of investing in NSF. So this is part of where this information becomes really important to them. So in particular, this finding aligns with policy recommendation 5 that recommends merit review policy changes that make the alignment between program portfolio formation and agency strategy and outcomes more clear. So the last piece of their general findings was that they were suggesting revisions to the merit review guidance and policy. And their intention behind this was to increase clarity and understanding around the purpose and intent of the broader impacts criterion. We're going to dive deeper into that in the next couple of slides, as this was a key point made by this report. But additionally, I wanted to note that they continue to want the policy and processes to focus on increasing participation from underrepresented regions, sectors, and institution types. And there were several policy recommendations that these findings aligned with, including renaming broader impacts to societal needs, clarifying definitions for merit review criteria, and emphasizing the equality of the two criteria when proposals are under consideration, as well as increasing diversity across the process and updating the policies and processes to do these things with the end goal of, again, increasing accountability and transparency. So here's one example of the suggested language changes to the merit review criteria policy. The current policy is on the left and the suggested changes are on the right. The main thing to note here is that there's a long paragraph before the presentation of the two criteria, and in the rewrite, we start with a clear statement on the roles of the people involved in the merit review process, followed by a presentation of the two criteria with concise and clear definitions. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which this is just a continuation of the changes from that first slide that we were just looking at. I don't have the current description listed here from the current policy because that part is actually blank. And as you can see, the suggested change adds a fair amount of text here. And much of what is here is actually just a rewrite of that paragraph that was before the criteria definitions in the current policy that we noted on the last slide. But additionally, there's a lot more emphasis on providing tangible information to make it clear what broader impacts are and why they need to be considered equally to intellectual merit. And these suggested changes bring into view what the NSB meant by their findings and recommendations to provide clear definitions of the merit review criteria. This is only one example. You can actually find the rest of their suggested language changes for the merit review policy in Appendix B of the report. Okay. And then the last thing that I wanted to go over is in terms of the report findings, is this much discussed suggested change of the name from broader impacts to societal needs. So if you look at the figure on the left, it shows two bar charts, and on the y-axis, you have percentage of survey respondents, and the x-axis lists the options given to the participants. This is results from a survey, an internal survey of NSF employees for context. So they surveyed NSF staff and asked them questions. It was like a whole survey of questions, but the questions that are relevant for these bar charts have more to do with like how broader impacts and intellectual merit are weighed against each other and how NSF staff felt about that. And so what they found was that 61% thought that intellectual merit was given more weight than broader impacts. And then interestingly, 96% thought the application of intellectual merit criterion to a proposal was clear, like how reviewers are supposed to do that, but only 53% said that about broader impacts. So this is kind of, once again, highlighting the lack of clarity around how to write broader impacts, how to assess them, how to review them. And so as a result of this and other information that Sharmini talked about earlier from the listening sessions and the focus groups, broader impacts are not consistently given equal weight to intellectual merit. And some of this is probably due to lack of clarity around how to apply that. So one thing they wanted to suggest was this name change. They thought it would likely provide a better understanding of what is meant for both the scientific community and the public. And also it can clarify the role of solicitation-specific guidance, since that guidance often addresses specific societal issues. So a name change alone is not enough to make this criteria clearer, though. And as we just saw in the previous two slides, they're also recommending changes in how the policy is written, as well as changes in how the evaluation is done to ensure both criteria receive equal weight. And then the last thing to note about this is that if a name change does go through for this changing broader impacts to societal needs, it will actually require congressional approval to do that. So for now, it's going to continue to be called broader impacts in in an official sense. Okay, so that's kind of the end of the findings that we were going to discuss from this report, the major things. We spent a lot of time talking about that without directly addressing the current landscape, aside from us mentioning that the entire NSB had been fired. So we'd like to provide and briefly go through a timeline of recent events. Sharmini mentioned the National Science Board members, or NSB members, were all fired abruptly on April 24th of this year, and this action promulgated immediate responses from many scientific organizations, as well as letters to Congress and the administration from former members of the NSB and former NSF directors. I've got a quote here from that letter expressing their concerns. We write with a single purpose to underscore the urgency of restoring full leadership and governance at the National Science Foundation during a period of intense international competition. That letter, shortly after that, was followed by a request for information by a ranking member on the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, Tammy Baldwin. She addressed her letter to the agency and the administration asking for a response deadline of June 8th. And as far as I know, there has been no response to this letter that's been made publicly available. Senator Baldwin also made it clear how troubling this development was, stating that these actions convey to the American scientific community or global competitors in private industry a disregard for critical American scientific research and development. So currently, we do not know when new appointments will be made to the National Science Board, and as noted in the linked article entitled "Administration Explains NSB Firing as Criticism Grows," there's some question about the legality of what the administration did, and likely it's going to take some time for this to work through the system. The NSB website will likely reflect updates when they are made publicly available. Currently, it states that new appointments are pending. And then the one last thing we wanted to mention, because it's relevant to grant making, is that the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, has released a rule for public comment on the Federal Register, and that's going to affect every aspect of federal grant making. And if it is enacted, it would affect fiscal year 2027 grants. So with all this information, or lack of information in some ways, what can we do in the scientific community? So first thing I'll mention is, what does this mean for updates to the merit review process? Likely it means it will be delayed. Usually NSB and NSF work together on implementing recommendations that the NSB gives them. And then, as Sharmini mentioned earlier, it has to go through a period of public comment, and then the changes go into effect. It was predicted that they may release a new PAPG this year sometime, but I don't know that that's going to happen now that the NSB is not there. So likely any changes are going to be delayed, and we'll just be continuing to follow the current version of the PAPG. In terms of what we can do, we can keep applying to open programs and communicating with program officers. You can stay informed. You can sign up for NSF alerts if you want updates on what's going on with NSF or new changes happening there, programs, new PAPG, any of that stuff. Also, if you're interested in staying more up to date on science policy news, the American Institute of Physics has a great science policy newsletter that you can sign up for. The link is here too. And then if you're interested, you can learn more about the proposed OMB rule. There's guidance and resources from both the Association of American Universities and the Association of Public and Land-Grant Universities. There are also various discipline-specific societies that have resources for this as well. And if you feel comfortable, you can comment on how that proposed rule may impact you as a scientist or administrator. That comment period's open until July 13th this month. There's also guidance on how to make comments, if you've never done that before, from Stand Up for Science. So aside from commenting on the OMB rule, reaching out to your institution, your professional societies, and your representatives, and just letting them know what you're concerned about as a scientist with what's happening at NSF and NSB in general is also something that you can do. So keep that in mind. And this is just a reminder that while the report we went over with you all today makes recommendations to update the merit review policy and procedures, they have not been officially enacted yet. So until they release a new PAPG, proposers should continue to follow the current PAPG, which is 24-1 plus the two supplements that they released earlier this year. And before we jump into any remaining questions you may have, can you go to the next slide, Sharmini? Okay. We have some basic closing housekeeping items. We're here as a free resource for you all, so please reach out to us. You can reach us through email addresses listed on this slide. You can also access important QEM related resources using the QR codes on this page, including future webinars and information on all of the QEM research heroes. And finally, we would love to have your feedback on this webinar, what was helpful, what could be improved, or if you have specific topics or funding opportunities you'd like to see covered, please put those in the suggestions part of your feedback on the webinar feedback form linked on this page. Thanks for spending this time with us, and I think we have about 20 minutes for general questions now.
And you can use the Q&A box, the chat tool, or to raise your hand to come off mute. We have a comment in the Q&A. NSF just released an update to the PAPG, but it has been renamed to Guidance for Federal Assistance. It's on the Federal Register now for public comments. It aligns with the proposed OMB update to the Uniform Guidance to CFR.
Okay.
Okay.
I had not seen that yet. I'm going to have to go look at that. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Yeah. We also have another comment that we mentioned broader impacts changing to societal needs. The comment says that it would be societal benefits rather than needs.
Okay. I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
So we have plenty of time for questions and comments. Again, you can use the chat. It's open for everybody. You can raise your hand to come off mute or use the Q&A box. Could you please provide a link? I'm assuming that
A
means
link to
the
the
report
report or
the GFA. If it's the report, we will be adding a link to the NSB report in the slides.
yeah, it's already in the slides
Yeah.
too. So, but we can put one in the chat too right now. I have it up, so let me do that. All right, so there's a link to the report in the chat. It's actually to the press release for the report, but the link to the report is in that press release.
And we have a question, probably that a lot of people have, from Ricky Caldwell. What would be your recommendations for an assistant professor in navigating the current funding environment? Proceed as normal?
Well, I guess it depends on what like you're defining as normal. I think for programs that are open, yeah, I mean, you would apply to those like normal. There's a lot of programs that are not open right now because of changes that have happened. So there's more limited places to apply for funding. But in terms of like how, you know, they're taking in proposals and everything, that still remains the same. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Sharmini.
Yeah, I think if there are sometimes people have questions about specific wording that's used in proposal development, you can also reach out to the specific program officers. There's usually a program email for specific questions you have about a solicitation and any concerns you have.
And then I would add, like, because I know they are running more short-staffed, if the contact for a particular program, especially if it's just like a program specific email, I would make sure you send your questions at least a week before you expect to get the answers, because it may take them a little while to respond.
We have a couple of comments here too. So Gregory
Before,
Davis.
Christine, before we move on to that, I want to add from a QEM perspective, our mindset is that you continue to apply for grants. The money is out there. The money has to be distributed. And so, yes, there's a lot of things going on, a lot of roadblocks, so on and so forth, but the money is there. And if you have a proposal that fits anything that's open, apply for it because the money is there. So don't stop applying. Don't stop moving forward.
Thanks, Tarina. In the issue of evenly weighing broader impacts and intellectual merit, isn't it different from one solicitation to another? Some solicitations, like astronomy, seem geared more towards intellectual merit, while others, like training for technicians, seem to be weighed towards broader impact. Can you comment on that?
I can answer that if you don't have an immediate comment, Sharmini.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Let me
So,
add.
I think really kind of more what's behind it is that I feel like intellectual merit is clear, and this seems to be kind of the results they were getting from their surveys, their listening sessions, and everything, where like you need to kind of have a plan for like what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and then how you're going to evaluate whether there was success. And that's kind of like, whatever problem you're trying to address in your proposal, you're going to lay it out that way. And then with the broader impacts part of it, I think sometimes it ends up being more, along the lines of like stuff will get you developed for a course, or we're going to train this many students, and like sometimes that has some kind of evaluation plan with it, and sometimes it doesn't, but there's not always as much clear information for like, okay, maybe this is like what we expect the outcomes to do, but we don't specify how we're going to do that or how that's going to be measured as success. And I think that's kind of more like where they're talking about them being weighed more equally, is there's a little bit more scrutiny on like the evaluation plan for intellectual merit than there is for the broader impacts sometimes. So that's one part of it. I don't think that's the entire thing, but I do think that that's a big part of it. And I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that, Sharmini.
Yeah, and I think the intention is that regardless of solicitation, intellectual merit and broader impacts are considered equally, like the ramifications of each are considered equally during the review process. And yeah, again, what that means may vary from directorate or solicitation, and that's part of the issue of why it keeps coming up in these evaluations of how
Yeah,
it's actually being applied.
and to add to what you were just saying, Sharmini, too, I think that's part of why they're trying to improve the policy and the process by being more clear about what they mean by broader impacts. Because I think a lot of like what she just said and what I was just saying, that's where a lot of the confusion is coming in. Like people aren't really sure, like, okay, well, how do you label that? And I apologize that I completely just like word switched. It is societal benefits, and I don't know why I like did it that way. So that was like a mental blank spot for me. So I've updated that, so it's fixed now. So thank you to the person that pointed that out because I didn't even realize I had done that. So yeah, but I think that's part of, what they're trying to do with these changes is make it less murky what that means. And, because I think it can be hard to be like, okay, well, what are the broader impacts of like what I'm doing? For some people's work, the broader impacts of what they're doing may not be known like in a big scale format, like for example, like the people who are studying heat sensitive, like heat tolerant bacteria, I don't think they knew that that was going to lead to polymerase chain reaction and a complete like change of the way that we do genetics, right? So like there's some of those things that you're not going to know, but that doesn't have to be like the only type of like societal benefit or broader impact that I think they're thinking about. And I think it's
Exactly.
more of the emphasis on like what can you think about that's going to benefit society with what you're doing? And some of that too is like in response to like increasing calls for why are we spending money on stuff? What is it helping with? Like, and just giving more tangible outcomes for those things as well.
Thanks for a great answer. Michael Spire says, oh, this is interesting. Another new development of note. This morning, the Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit struck down Florida's 2022, quote, Stop Woke Act on the grounds that the government could not control classroom speech by faculty. Not a total win, but the principle could be extended to soften or remove the administration's restrictions on research topics.
Yeah, and I think that'd be another thing, in terms of building off of what Tarina said, but then also just I'm gonna go on a limb here and say that Sharmini and I both probably feel this way about it. Like, don't let the fear stop you from writing it the way that you think it matters. There's a lot to be said about like a lot of what goes wrong in some of these situations is people obeying in advance. And so just understand what like the limits that you can push are. And like Sharmini said, talk to program officers if you're unsure about how to deal with something or how to address something that you want to, do for your project. They're there to help for that and they want to help. So,
I also want to add to that by saying that um, there are ways to say and do what you always intended to do by not using trigger language. So there's always another way to say it. So just avoid trigger language and you should be fine.
And
yeah, Tori's added a nice comment here. Intellectual merit and broader impacts are considered equally in review of all NSF proposals, regardless of program or disciplinary emphasis. And every proposal should advance knowledge and societal benefit. In case it helps, the NSF Broader Impacts webpage may help with framing societal benefits for any proposed idea. Yeah, and that I think the last webinar that we did, which was on merit review criteria, we actually did provide that link to that page that they have, the helpful tips for addressing broader impacts in your proposals that NSF has on their website. So that's also in the resources page for working on broader impact statements in that presentation that we did last month. Or May. It was May, technically. Yeah.
we still have about 10 minutes for questions if anyone else wants to chime in. I wanted to pick your brain a little bit about what you think the differences are between something called broader impacts versus societal benefits. I can conceptualize it. I have an idea of what it means. I think it's narrowing the focus towards benefits to society and the population versus just broader impacts of maybe downstream scientific discoveries, what you were saying, Jennifer, about PCRs. So I wonder, just in your mind, what the semantic shift actually implies.
So to me, I think it's more of a clarity thing because like when you say broader impacts to me, it kind of the way I hear that is more like, okay, well, how is what I'm doing like helping outside of what I'm doing, essentially, right? And whether that's like long-term downstream impacts or, like maybe it's workforce development because, X number of graduate students get mentored or whatever. But I think with the shift to saying it the other way, the societal benefits instead, it's more about like how does it benefit society? Like generally, like it doesn't necessarily have to be like broader in the sense that it applies to everyone in the society. Like if it's helping some pocket somewhere, like an area maybe that has, less economic opportunities for people and the work that you're doing is going to help with, workforce development for something that's becoming like a bigger economic input in that area, right? So that may not like help workforce development across like the nation, but it would help in the area that your institution is serving, for example. And so I feel like saying societal benefits kind of makes those things feel a little bit more possible versus, broader impacts, making it feel like you have to make it bigger. But that's just kind of the feeling that I get when I hear those two terms being used. I don't know if you've got any other thoughts on
Yeah,
what you think, Sharmini.
I also think about, the framing, um, shedding more light on what NSF is doing from a public perspective. Um, Broader impacts seems a little more nebulous to a public audience, I would think, than societal benefit. And um, I think we can see a lot in policy that there are questions of what is the benefit to the public from an external view. And maybe that's also providing some clarity on that front because that is a constant um, goal within NSF, but it may not be communicated as well as they'd like to a broader audience. I think you're on mute, Christine.
I apologize. Sally PS has a raised hand, and I am going to permit Sally to talk. You may ask your question, Sally.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm on a new device, so I was having trouble. I was wondering, based on the reframing of broader impacts as societal benefits, I mean, I think it's very helpful because I think I've always had trouble figuring out what to say and not say in broader impacts. And I think a lot of people really interpret broader impacts more in terms of outreach activities and things like that, which can be also could fall under societal benefit, but not thinking of it scientifically as much. But I'm wondering if, with the new framing, would something like broader scientific impacts then fall under intellectual merit?
Hmm. That's a really good question.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I also like in some ways feel like some of the lines between these two criteria are not, like it's not like a stark line, right?
Right.
There's
Yeah.
definitely some overlap. So, and
Yeah, I guess
not
I had a harder time understanding intellectual merit. I think the NIH framing, well, it's broken down more, but it's easier to connect with, say, significance than intellectual merit, which seems more abstract. And
right.
but it sounds like others have had an easier time with that.
Yeah, I mean, and some of like what we were reporting on people having more confusion about it, a lot of that was people who were either like reviewing like how the policies were being enacted, um, or people who were internal to NSF. So that's where like a lot of that feedback came from, or people who were what was it, Sharmini? VPs of research, I think, and like sponsored office programs were some of the listening sessions that they did, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
So there is like a piece of that too where it's like who they're talking to
right.
that found it. And it wasn't so much that like NSF doesn't consider them equally. I think what they were trying to say is they don't always feel that that's like what happens in practice, like that's what they aspire to
Fire
do.
too.
And that's never not been a thing, but there were differences in feeling on like how easy it was to like assess both the criteria from that perspective. But yeah, I think with I can understand what you mean by with intellectual merit, it can be harder to be like, well, what's the significance? Because that's kind of like where you see it kind of overflow into, societal benefits, because that's kind of, where I think a lot of people go when they think about that, because that part does matter. I think it could also be thought of in the framework of like, how does this contribute to, advancing knowledge in whatever discipline your research fits within to, for example. That could be something that's significant about it as well.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, well, this is what I wanted to say with regards to that. As an example, let's say someone developed a new way of growing crops that was very prolific. And this is addressing the boundary or the murkiness between the two. So if somebody's developing a new crop methodology to make crops more efficient, effective, last longer, and widespread, the intellectual merit is the science that made that happen. The broader impact is now millions more people can be fed with these crops that are produced. And so that's how there's a connection between the two, but there's a clear separation between what's scientific in terms of intellectual merit and what the societal impact is. So I just wanted to give that as an example of kind of how to frame and look at these issues and how to try to separate them into the two pieces. Because you can have a scientific development, there's a smaller piece of an atom. Okay. Yes, that's a scientific, breakthrough. Does it have any societal impact? Maybe not at the time that it's discovered, but maybe in the future it will. So you can have a scientific or intellectual merit breakthrough without a societal impact. So just kind of when you think about what you're putting in writing, think about it in those terms. So just as an example.
It's a great example. Thanks, Sharmini.
Yeah. There was a comment if we had considered inviting former board members who worked on the report. We did consider that, but we were planning to share the recording with the former director, and yeah, we'll see if there are future
Maybe
development.
some follow-up will happen after that.
Yeah.
And I also wanted to give credit to Sally P.S. The last couple of links that I dropped in the chat were from her. They were not found by me.
Oh, nice.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, Sally.
Thank you both. All right, we have really enjoyed having everyone here today. Thank you to Drs. Jennifer Riehl and Sharmini Pitter-Boghos. Thank you for attending. We hope to see you at a future webinar, and we have dropped the evaluation link into the chat so you can give us some ideas about what you'd like to see in the future. And we want to thank you again for participating in our webinar series. We hope to see you at a future webinar. Please navigate to our events page to learn about our upcoming events and webinars. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.